don't belittle.
Surely you've noticed. Female superheroes aren't nearly as revered as male superheroes.
Sure they are. There's Supergirl, Batgirl.
They're so lame. Merely extensions of their male counterparts. Who besides you is a heroine in her own right?
Huh! There's Wonder Woman and, Wonder Woman? She's right! There is no one else!
Well, about time film industry noticed that, huh? And I know what you're thinking about, but Wonder Woman is in animation. Isn't this YouTube channel animation only? Don't worry, it's way too soon to go off track. We're talking animation today as well, just tackling it from a different angle from the basic format that I've made for my reviews so far. And seeing how well the Wonder Woman film is doing on theaters right now, I remembered the animated version and thought it would be fun to revisit it and compare, since both movies manage roughly the same idea of being an origin story and Wonder Woman's first look of the modern day world. So we're doing a 2 for the price of 1 kind of review today. There will be spoilers for the 2017 live action and 2009 animated Wonder Woman in here, so if you plan on seeing any but haven't, I recommend leaving this video for later. Consider this your warning. That said, I'm Cynthia Cisneros and this is Animation Corner. Today, Wonder Woman. The character of Wonder Woman was created by DC Comics in 1941 as a feminist icon that looked to turn around the damsel in distress cliché character to give it a chance to be a hero role. She was also World War II propaganda and was often shown fighting the USA's enemies. Once wartime was over, Wonder Woman was allowed her own backstory and a unique set of villains to work with, along with an identity, that of an Amazon princess named Diana Prince. Born from mud and blessed by the Greek goddesses with strength, beauty, compassion, intelligence, and courage. Wonder Woman has been a classical and iconic character pretty much from scratch, and her first big exposure to mainstream audiences came from the 1975 Linda Carter show, which was based around the pilot 1974 TV movie starring Kathy Lee Crosby. Ever since, though she's always had a steady and assured place in media as an iconic and worldwide known female superhero role, and having existed for over 30 years in popular media, Wonder Woman has only been seen as a supporting cast member in animated series and feature-length animation, such as her appearances in the Super Friends, Justice League, and various other DC comic properties. Enter 2009 film The direct-to-DVD animated Wonder Woman movie. This film was directed by the now widely known Lauren Montgomery, who, for those not well versed in animation names, has quite the impressive portfolio under her name, having worked as a storyboard artist in series such as early He-Man, Ben 10, and both Avatar series, just to name a few from many. Besides that, she's now a common name to see in DC Comics related animation, lending not only her storyboarding talents but also her production and direction. First to several episodes of the Legion of Superheroes show, then Wonder Woman, and after that, 3 other direct-to-DVD animated superhero films. Currently, she's a producer, episode director, and co-showrunner of the popular Netflix original Voltron series. Jump cut to present day, our 2017 film is directed by Patty Jenkins, this being her second direction work, first being 2003's Monster. Thanks to the fact that on opening weekend Wonder Woman has made over $100 million in box office, this makes Jenkins the highest grossing opening female director in history to date. So now we have 2 films made by 2 female directors with roughly the same story to cover. That must mean the movies are very similar, right? Well, not at all. Let's start with the animated version. In ancient times, we see the Amazons fight against Ares, god of war. No, not that one. This guy. Anyways, when Hippolyta, the Amazonian queen, is denied the chance to kill him once and for all by Zeus, Hera allows her and her women to retreat to a secret island named Themyscira, where they will never age or be bothered ever again. Plus, they get to keep Ares as a mortal prisoner. And besides that, Hippolyta gets her lifelong wish to have a daughter who she names Diana. Years later, a fallen pilot named Steve Trevor accidentally comes across the island just as Ares escapes his prison and runs into modern-day world. Steve is captured and the Queen organizes a tournament to decide which Amazon is to escort him back to civilization and look for Ares, which Diana rightfully wins. The rest of the movie is her journey into our world, adapting into modern times, her relationship with Steve, and her quest to find and defeat Ares. As for the 2017 version, though similar in theory, goes like this. The whole movie is actually a flashback Diana is having of her first time in modern-day world thanks to the soul picture she gets. We see Diana grow in the island, and then the story goes pretty straightforward, having no time for tournaments or whatnot once she's an adult. Steve simply falls directly into the island, with soldiers hot in his trail, and action ensues immediately. Once that's done with, Steve is interrogated by the Amazons and Diana is horrified by the state of his country, currently dealing with World War I, and she's convinced that it's all Ares is doing, who she only knows because of her mother's stories. The Queen forbids her from going back into civilization with Steve, but she goes anyways, the two sticking together for mutual guidance and help. The movie takes place mostly in Europe, and we also get to see Diana adapting to modern world and trying hard to save the day, though here it happens in war times instead of a simple present time setting. With the summaries, both movies may sound pretty alike besides the beginning, but as a whole, they couldn't be more different. The characters, tone, atmosphere, everything is completely distinct. I already know which I like best of the two, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you all I personally see right and wrong with both so you can tell for yourself, starting with what I think both do right. In the animated version, there's a few cool details that would have been very nice to see in the 2017 version and that I was pretty sad were missing because I remember them so clearly despite not having seen the movie in a long time. Those being the bit of backstory before Diana was born that would have worked to develop Hippolyta a little more, the Amazons tournament, and the invisible jet. It would have been fun to see the live-action take on these, even though I guess I get why they couldn't be there. Besides that, the animated movie has a pretty quick pacing, which I enjoy in action-oriented stories. It also feels a little short for what it is, but it works in its favor because that leaves you wanting more, or if you didn't like it, it's mercifully short. I think it had a rather solid balance, and a rather set line on where the beginning, middle, and end of the story were. I enjoyed the animation a lot and the character design, and the fighting was both easy to follow and entertaining, as was some of the main banter between Diana and Steve. In the live-action version, we have a story that makes tribute to the character's real origins as a war icon, and it allows for involvement with characters other than Steve Trevor, though he remains the main relationship. There's an interest to keep the audience guessing if Ares even exists in this world, or if Diana's just being naive over the true nature of man. And that kind of take on trying to know who the actual antagonist of the movie is pretty cool. The casting works really well, and I feel there's real chemistry around all the actors, both in main and supporting roles. They make the story feel far more alive and organic than it could have been. And finally, my very favorite thing is that Diana feels like a real person. Something I've always had against DC comic heroes before is how untouchable they feel, more like gods than superheroes. And though Diana gives off this majestic and powerful vibe just like she should, she still feels approachable, joyful, and alive, just as a superhero should, and just as her animated and printed incarnations always make me feel about the character. Now, after talking about all the good the movies do, I also have to sit down and actually look at the problems, because the way I see it, both movies are actually kind of flawed. So here's my take on that. The animated version takes one of its advantages over the live action, the use of backstory, and it kinda trips over itself with it as well. It's all in the opening line, really. I mean, we have a dark and grim battlefield, people dying left and right, this really somber kind of color palette going on, and then we start with a sex joke. No, seriously, the literal first line of the movie sets the whole tone for this thing.
You seem as eager to meet me on the battlefield as you once did in the bedroom, Hippolyta.
I only hope you prove more skilled in this arena, Ares.
See, in a way, this line alone kind of describes my biggest problem with this movie as a whole. The writing isn't very smart. It tries really hard to be knowing, but it only really proves how little it knows. Like, for example, that very first joke tries to be a cheeky adult dialogue and is framed as this hot burn, but based on what we've told very quickly after the situation, it's kinda not a laughing matter.
I will forever be grateful to you for this child you gave me.
I gave you nothing. You forced him upon me like a curse.
Yikes. And if you know your Greek mythology, lines that try to do the same knowing and cheeky thing later on really lose their punch once you really think about them.
You think that's bad? Zeus seduced one of my mom's friends by turning into a swan. A swan. True story.
Seduced. Sure. Because Greek gods are all about your consent, huh? And writing on this, let's talk about another big problem in this version that's directly linked to the bad writing. The way it manages Greek mythology. Or more like the way it thinks it's managing Greek mythology. A few of the supporting characters have the names of Greek goddesses, but it's never really specified if they're the actual goddesses or if they're just human women named after them. And though it usually wouldn't really matter, it really creates confusion because the roles they're giving in the story are similar to that of the goddesses they're named after. So you really have to wonder if all the name dropping the movie does is actually even aware of itself.
You know, Artemis, I found myself saying a little prayer for you last night.
Did you, Diana? How kind.
Yes, I prayed that Apollo would inspire you with a strategy that might end your rather long string of defeats at my hand.
Like in that line, is Diana teasing Artemis because she prayed to her brother for her defeat? Or if this is just an ordinary woman named after Artemis, is the writing really so bad that they didn't realize that the god you actually pray for battle strategy is Athena, as she's the goddess of wisdom and strategy, and Apollo is just the god of prophecy? Point being, this movie mostly throws names around to show that it knows about mythology, guys! Even though it really doesn't, and any person with a slight amount of knowledge could tell you otherwise in a second. Not to mention that, to prove my point even further, it has probably one of the worst Hades in popular media that I have ever seen in my life. I mean, there's no such thing as an accurate Hades in popular media ever, and it's not quite Percy Jackson live-action bad kind of Hades, but it gets pretty darn far in the scale, seeing how much it actually looks more like Bacchus or Dionysus more than any other god. I could also go off about how weird it is that a god was literally stripped of all power and that the world is all the same without his influence in humanity and history, and that Diana didn't know of this until her adulthood when he's so poorly guarded, and it would have been so easy to just teach her about this as a child so she'd be more careful in leaving a harmless Amazon alone to guard him, but I think I made my case about the mythology aspect of this movie. It sucks big time. So, moving past the fact that this is a story about a Greek heroine that knows crap about a Greek mythology, the writing for the characters outside this isn't all that great either. Anyone who isn't Steve, Hades, or Diana is mostly there in name to fill the role, such as for Ida Candy's case, who's absolutely adorable in the live action, but in this version...
Etta Candy, this is Diana. She's part of the team that, rescued me.
Pleasure.
Which takes us to...
For little old me, it's holding my favorite pen hostage.
Which takes us to...
I'm sorry, Etta Candy, but what's wrong with you?
Excuse me?
Well, you appear to be strong and in good health, yet you can't move that table by yourself. I was just wondering if there was something wrong with you.
My final point about this movie in particular. Extreme feminism and anti-feminism.
No! God!
Look, I'm gonna try hard not to get personal about this one because one, it's the internet, and two, the writing in this movie is already so poor that choosing sides in this case is almost impossible because it's so poorly managed on both sides of the situation. It's just all a messy, messy mess. And seeing this movie that knows nothing about mythology is trying to rely on mythologic elements, trying also to be a feminist message, it's frustrating because pulling the kind of writing is too much for something like this. It's not on its level, and I hate both sides presented here, and it's just tiring to talk about, so yeah. The 2017 version, on the flip side, doesn't really bother getting into this kind of discussion, thankfully. I was really afraid of the movie getting political or trying as hard as the 2009 one did in bringing down this big whooping extreme feminist message, taking advantage of how long it's taken to be released, but it was smart enough not to do so despite how easily it could have happened. The 2017 version understands that its existence alone is already that big whooping feminist message, along with one of love and hope, and that Wonder Woman isn't a superhero for girls, it's just a superhero for everyone who happens to be a girl. But this is a flaw section of the video, so I have to be fair and also say what I think were the wrongdoings in the live action. There were 4 big wrongdoings in the live action for me, which were the lack of stakes, pacing, presentation, and the Aries situation. Let's start with the lack of stakes. What do I mean by that? Well, the fact that this movie was presented as a flashback from the very beginning wasn't the smartest of choices for me, because as it starts, we already know how it's going to end. See, I think this problem could have been so easily fixed by making the very first scene to be Diana's childhood in Themyscira and making the scene at the very end what we saw in the movie. It would have been far more emotional that way, and it would have given the movie stakes, which I feel there weren't, because thanks to the beginning scene, I already knew the whole time that Diana was going to come victorious from her quest, and that the friends she met along the way were either gonna be dead or way too old to probably be with her in present time anymore. So it really makes it hard to care about the characters that will come later on, because you keep thinking, well, she's not gonna see them again, why should I? Another problem with the movie for me was the pacing. I feel it was a little too slow for the long length the movie has. So there were certain scenes that I feel dragged a little. Though in this case, I'm willing to believe this problem comes way more in the DC movie format than just in Wonder Woman itself. And this is also where I'm gonna talk about presentation. Each movie, in my opinion, has to be very long, very serious, and very somber in order to feel like a DC movie. So despite this being a story about a colorful, hopeful, and very charming character, it still has this overly serious, even kind of dark nature that all DC films seem to have as a common denominator. That pacing and overall format makes me really wonder if, for example, children enjoy these movies. They have the video games and the shows, sure, but do kids even enjoy DC movies nowadays? I distinctly remember children falling asleep in the Batman vs Superman showing I attended. So despite me appreciating everything that the movies try to do with their complex stories, I have to wonder if Wonder Woman can manage to be entertaining enough. I really hope it is, because as I mentioned either, it's the first time I get a hero that felt so accessible, but that's my opinion as a young woman. All in all, I appreciate a good story, but for it to always be this overly long and overly serious and have this feeling that only adults may enjoy, aren't superheroes supposed to be there for everyone? Especially children, as they're their main idols and examples? I don't know. Like I said, I think it's more of an issue I have in general about live action movies and not specifically Wonder Woman, but it affects it as well. I just feel they're all so somber, and when they're not... Finally, we have the Ares situation. Big spoiler for the ending, by the way. So this movie sets up Ares from the beginning as more of an actual myth than a character, unlike the animated version. We don't know what he looks like or if he's even real at all, because Diana doesn't either. And every time Diana speaks of him, people look at her weird because it seems so naive to the modern times that this grown woman would so vehemently believe in a big guy in the sky making everyone fight to the death. And there's this very satisfying scene where she actually manages to cut down the guy she thinks to be Ares. So when she realizes the war doesn't stop with his death, and Steve tells her about mankind being naturally imperfect, it was kind of a great scene. Diana coming to understand that the concept of good and evil is such a touchy and complex and human situation, and that Ares only really exists as a force that makes those bad impulses stronger but isn't responsible for them, it's great. If Diana had dealt with that truth, then the movie would have just kept Dr. Poison as the one antagonist in the movie, and Diana could have just gotten her love and wish to protect humankind regardless of its natural imperfection, it would have been a much more effective message. So, I was actually kind of disappointed when Ares physically showed up as the actual antagonist of the movie minutes after Diana had given up, just to prove how she was right all along and spoon-fed the audience with a clear solution to the problem. The cartoonishly 100% bad obstacle for our hero to take down, instead of a challenge and a question to pose. Is humanity really worth protecting when all we do is fight with each other anyways, and will continue to do so till the end of time because that's just how humans are? But nope. Ares was actually there, fueling war and making it worse, and his defeat seemingly brought peace to the area Diana was in. It kind of defeats the purpose of having Dr. Poison and her general guy in the movie at all. Except, as pretty frustrating bait. especially with how the movie builds them both up and gives us so much screen time to what the heck even happened with her at the end anyways. I don't know, this whole situation wasn't a deal breaker, but I just wish it could have been managed differently because it had real potential with where it was going. Like, just cut the fight with Ares at the end and make it a confrontation with Dr. Poison, and there we go. So at the end, which movie wins? Over here we have a poorly written disaster, but it has good animation, action, and begrudgingly enough, once you try not to think too hard about the banter, kinda charming chemistry between the main leads. And over here we have a long and somber presentation as usual that could have worked a lot better, a little differently, but still manages to have the first is a hero who can be approachable, hopeful, and the presentation for many great things to come. Besides also having a realistic character relationship not only with the main but also the supporting cast. Okay, so probably it's kind of obvious by now, but I like the live-action version better. But after lots of thinking about it, and during all of the making of this review, I have to be honest, I don't love either movie. I like both movies, both have pretty solid points, but they aren't exactly my thing thanks to the problems I pointed out in both, as pacing and writing as some of my favorite aspects in films, and pacing and writing are the biggest problems in each of the movies. Despite not loving either film nor fighting them to be the masterpieces some people think they are, I like them. I support them, and I think they're both very important films, and I'm incredibly grateful they exist at all. I'm the kind of person who looks a lot for herself in media, and after countless years of seeing female superheroes mostly just on small screen or in comics as a part of a team, seeing this makes me feel so good. Especially after how so many years ago all we really had to go by used to be, well... So who cares that it's not my favorite movie ever? The fact that the next step that was taking after Catwoman was Wonder Woman, and even if it took 13 years for it to happen, it's a great step, and I cannot wait to see more of it. I can only hope with less years of wait, of course, that this movie becomes the door opener for many more girl superheroes to come over to the big screen after all the success it has had both critically and with the fans, which feels so great to see. And with that, more animated counterparts for me to look at and compare in this channel. To finish off, I leave the animated version of Wonder Woman with a 3-star grade and the live action with a 3.5 grade. Both are entertaining and make me so glad to see around, but the bad writing in one and the slower pacing in the other won't be having me personally seek them soon after again. I definitely recommend both, if anything, just to support them for what they've done. So tell me in the comments, which do you prefer? Do you know about the animated one? I'm Cynthia Cisneros and this was Animation Corner. Liked it? Soon, more to come.